Well, let's get more analysis. We can speak to William Lawrence, who's a professor of political science and international affairs at the American University and a former US diplomat in Morocco, who joins us now from DC. Thank you so much for joining us here on France 24. You lived in Morocco, I gather, for 6 years. What are you hearing from your contacts on the ground there about the situation?
So yeah, I was in the mountains for 2 years and a year in Marrakesh. I know these areas very well. I shot a movie up near Moulay Ibrahim and near Imlil some years ago. We were up there about 6 weeks and traveled all over that area. And of course, as not a lot of people know, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco back in the 80s. And so the response that I've done is we're networking with recently returned Peace Corps volunteers who served in the High Atlas and current volunteers there. There are 7 to orient our fundraising efforts. I think we've raised about $16,000 at Friends of Morocco, one of the organizations I'm working with, since yesterday in the last 25 hours or so. And we're trying to gap fill because the Moroccan government's doing a lot of things well, but there are a lot of things they're not going to be able to do well. And we're trying to use our local knowledge and Moroccan context on the ground to help. What I'm hearing is the following. This is mostly an issue of accessing the hundreds of villages that have been cut off. And they're cut off in a number of ways. The roads have been blocked, but internet's not working. And of course, the houses are uninhabitable. And many of these communities have not been reached at all yet. And there's no lack of resources in Morocco in terms of human resources and supplies that can be given. But we're not seeing yet enough organization at the top to distribute out where it needs to be. Now, there's several phases here. Right now, we're in the rescue phase. They talk about 48 hours, but it's longer of survivability. So one of the organizations we plan to fund is search and rescue efforts by mountaineer organizations, the mountain climbers that take people up Tupal, one of the highest summits in Africa that's nearby, near Moulay Ibrahim, near the areas you've been talking about. And they have an ability to get out to these areas where maybe there aren't enough helicopters or the helicopters can't reach. Of course, the Moroccan government's sequencing things here. They're sending out drones and then the helicopters, and then they try to clear the roads and get up there. But you're talking about really remote areas that already in many cases had no electricity, no running water, no internet, and they need help. And the messages aren't necessarily getting out. One final note here is I have a number of Moroccan friends who either live in Marrakesh or are from that area originally. Some are Moroccan Americans, and some of them haven't been able to reach their families at all. My contacts in some of these towns I haven't been able to reach at all. So we're just wondering, who's gotten up there, and what the fate of these people are, because there's very little information coming out from these towns and villages.
Yeah, I mean, all of that means, doesn't it, that the true scale of this tragedy probably won't be known for quite some time, will it?
Months. I think some towns they'll get 2 weeks from now, and so a lot of this is ad hoc. A lot of it's local citizens banding together and doing what they can with their bare hands. But I do. Let me just back up. I was on the Hurricane Katrina task force after the big hurricane in New Orleans that killed thousands of people. And the U.S. had a really hard time accepting international donations. And, I coordinated many of the international donations on that task force. It was hard for us, the Americans, to admit we needed help. And we got a lot of help from all over the world, timely help that was distributed in ways that was very useful given some constraints on what the U.S. government could do within its own borders. And it's not entirely a dissimilar situation right now where Morocco thinks it has all the resources and thinks it has all the expertise, but it's primarily the military now. And of course, they mobilized 1,000 doctors and 15,000 nurses, a lot of those in Marrakesh. But I don't think they have all the expertise they need. And if these 250 Turks are stuck at Turkey ready to come, and the French group and some of these other groups, I think 10 countries have mobilized teams ready to go. And of course, they've only accepted the Spaniards, as far as I can tell, in terms of boots on the ground. Morocco needs to open up its international cooperation aspects to bring in the expertise coming from Turkey, coming from Syria, Nepal, and other places, and get some knowledge on the ground that's used to dealing with these catastrophes. Now, if you can add, I can add one other thing. Morocco, it's not that they don't remember earthquakes for 100 years, although that point is well taken. Morocco had recent earthquakes in the 2000s It has earthquakes around the country on a fairly regular basis at a lower scale. They have floods, they have drought, they have disasters. These are very resilient populations who are used to successions of difficult conditions. So there's a lot of muscle memory in Morocco to responding to emergencies. What they don't have is accessibility. What they don't have necessarily is coordination. What they don't have necessarily is good communications and the ability to get what's needed up where it needs to be in these high mountain areas. And if I could also add one other thing, it's not just the epicenter area. So, for example, Taroudant, a town down by Agadir, has 400 dead, probably many more. They're not really accessible from Marrakesh. That's from Agadir. And there are a number of points. What does this add? There are a number of cities that have better access to some of the areas of damage than just Marrakesh. So another thing the international community do is point more resources at what you might call these satellite cities in a ring to get at areas that are more accessible from where they're coming from.
And just lastly, I mean, you mentioned that Morocco hasn't been embracing all of the offers of aid it's been given, including the offers made by France. And I just wondered how all of that's going down in Morocco and whether there's a sense of perhaps anger that not more has been done and not more offers of help have been accepted from the international community.
There's a ton of criticism on the ground from Moroccans. I think there was a poll earlier this year that said 70% of Moroccans didn't have confidence or trust in the government, although the king is very popular and they're expecting to set up, and the military is relatively popular. And Moroccans were very relieved to see such a massive military operation at the beginning. But there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration now that's building hour on hour, day on day, which is inevitable in these situations. There's some deserved criticism and some undeserved criticism being directed at the Moroccan government. But why not? Why not bring in these international teams with their dogs, with their special equipment for digging in rubble, with the knowledge and experience they have? There's no downside to admitting that you need help and bringing people in. And that also signals to the population that everything possible is being done. And also that gets the international community invested in this 1, 2, 3 year reconstruction that we're talking about. If I can add one other point, I don't think they're going to rebuild in all these locations. So we're going to have rebuildings of villages and towns adjacent to what was damaged, and we're going to have other populations relocated into cities or near cities. So there's a whole bunch of construction and reconstruction that's going to be going on to deal with these populations that's going to go on for years. And the more the international community gets involved now, the better.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Professor William Lawrence, thank you very much indeed.